Excellent. Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome to this new REN-1 Rendezvous, where we will focus specifically on renewables for economic development and industrialization in the African context. So my name is Rana Adib. I'm heading the REN-1 Secretariat here and very excited to welcome you for this new event. So I guess before to start on the content side, I'll have some housekeeping. So one is please turn off your mics and add your names and organizations to the chat and rename your name and organization. And we really appreciate very much if you can turn on your camera if there is no bandwidth issues, because we really like also in virtual space to see each other and know who we talk to. There is also a simultaneous French translation available, and if you need interpretation, you can scroll down to the lower part. There is this world interpretation icon, and this will lead you to the interpretation. Thanks to the interpreters. And yeah, so I guess I presented myself already. Last week we had a first conversation specifically looking at the renewables-based economy and what this concept, so to say, means in the African continent. A renewables-based economy from REN-1 side is really at the heart of our strategy. And why is this so? Because we realize that when we look at renewables, very often we look at it only as the fuel, but there is much more to it. And we have economies and societies, trade, political economy that have been built around fossil fuel. Renewables are very different of fossil fuel. It's clear that it's the fuel of the future, and we basically want to explore more in detail the economic development opportunities and industrialization opportunities that a renewable-based economy offers, or what this means in Africa. So it's the second dialogue in the series. From all the discussions and feedback we have, and also the analysis the team is doing, we already know that it will not be the last one. So please watch out and let us know if there are any things you would like to discuss or specific things you might want to contribute. Very happy to explore this. And I think the last part I would like to say about this is these rendezvous are really to start some of the critical conversation and spark collaboration. So I just think the reality is renewables is not the same everywhere. We have very different perspectives, very different insight. All these are really important to take into account when we build basically a renewable-based economy. So please share your views. And then I guess it's really also to acknowledge for the fact that, especially in the current geopolitical landscape, we need our collective voices to carry basically the opportunities renewables present, the benefit they have, but also clearly speak about some of the tension points. So I'm looking forward to this participatory session to unpack some of the aspects. And I mentioned a knowledge product, so we are currently finalizing, and the team is currently finalizing a strategic intelligence brief specifically on the topic of renewable energy for a renewable-based economy, economic development, industrialization in Africa. We would really love to have your, use it. So look out for it, use it, comment on it, let us know how to further improve. And yes, now let's kick off with the discussion. And I'm super happy to pass on to Matt, who will first walk us through a very quick pulse activity. And then we'll dive into lightning talk together with Frank. Matt, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I will load up a Zoom poll, which there will be a couple of questions to answer. However, before I launch the poll, as Rana suggested and asked in the beginning, if you can say hello in the chat, basically, who are you, where are you from, and what are you up to, and where you're dialing in from today, that would be lovely. But we need to capture some data, we need to capture some information. And a great way to do it is a simple Zoom poll. So I've just launched a Zoom poll, and you should be able to see it on your screen now. It should have popped up on your device, laptop or phone, or however you're joining today. And you'll see that there are two questions. The first one is multiple choice. What brings you to this rendezvous session today? Is it to grow your network? Is it to exchange knowledge about renewables in Africa? Are you curious about the renewable-based economy in the African context? Are you here to be inspired by others, interested to learn more about REN21? So that's the first question. If you can choose as many as relevant to you as you would like, that would be amazing. But also as well, the second question is, what do you understand by a renewables-based economy? And you have the option there to put in a sentence, maybe a couple of sentences, or maybe some keywords. As quick, as short, or as detailed as you would like it to be. It's all really great to understand kind of, what your understanding of a renewable-based economy is. So I will go quiet for about 30 seconds and just play some music in the background to give you a bit of time to think of your answer and add it in. Okay, so it's about a minute or so. So I'm going to just pause the music and say thank you for participating in the poll. There will be another one before the end of the session, and all the information we can get from you and share with you is really important to keep these conversations fresh, keep them going, and so on. So stick around, and whenever a poll pops up, please do join in. So on that note, I'm going to hand back over to Rana.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matt. So as I said, we'll kick this off with a lightning talk. We'll just very quickly, we'll have this as a follow-up, then we'll have a dynamic interactive roundtable discussion. And then you'll have the possibility to also discuss with each other and share your insights. So these are 3 blocks. First, I'm, however, very happy to invite Frank Othaminya, my colleague who's here, the collective advocacy lead and also leading on the Africa activities at REN21, who will basically make a lightning talk to kick us off. Over to you, Frank.
Thank you, Rana. So before, just let me know if everyone can see my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Loading.
Yes, it's just popped up, Frank.
Perfect. Sorry, just need to move everyone's faces. All right. Nice. So thank you, Rana, for the intro. Yeah, my name is Frank Okotmenya. I am the collective advocacy lead and the lead on the Africa community. And basically on this lightning talk, we're just going to run you through some of the key highlights and some of the key conclusions that we've been able to draw from our upcoming strategic intelligence brief that's going to be titled Unpacking a Renewable-Based Economy for Africa. Because of this session, we are going to look at renewable energy or renewables for economic development and industrialization. So to kick us off, once again, Africa in numbers. We can see that right now, Africa is about a fifth of global population. In 2050, it's going to be 2.5 billion, and that is going to be around, I think, also 22% of the global population. And then 60% of Africans are under the age of 25. The most youthful population in the world is in Africa. And then on some economic terms, there was a statistic from Africa Development Bank that shows that around 28% or 27.5% of African revenues are actually used to service sovereign debt. And still Africa is contributing as little as 2.8% to global GDP. So here immediately we see that we have a continent that's very youthful, that's growing very fast, but also its economic conditions are quite a stressful point. On the bright side, there are abundant resources in Africa, and these resources, are helpful for renewable energy generation. So the first two maps here are basically the potential for solar generation or solar potential and wind potential, and we can see this is actually quite big. And then in terms of natural resources, and here I pulled out this snapshot on critical minerals, there's all other resources. We can say that there are a lot of critical minerals in the continent, and they're quite spread out in sub-Saharan Africa. And to still build up on that, the energy potential, because this is about renewable energy and how that can lead to industrialization and economic development. Africa has the highest technical potential, not theoretical, technical potential. At 45%, it's the largest in the planet. So when we talk of renewable energy for economic development and industrialization, we can look at it in three levels. So the first one is, how can Africa use renewable energy as the main source of energy to produce green goods or goods? And then the second one would be, how can Africa harness renewables to produce tradable energy? And in this, we can already see that it's happening in some of the regional power pools. So South Africa Power Pool already has an electricity trading market. East Africa Power Pool is operationalizing it, and we have an electricity highway that's already operational for the East Africa Power Pool between Kenya and Ethiopia that's generating hydroelectricity. And then lastly, we have, the other level would be, how do we build up manufacturing or these job-intensive industrial processes, like processing, manufacturing, and assembling in Africa, and how do we capture this value chain? So I'm just going to pull us more specific, be more specific on a couple of these points. So when we talk of renewable energy for green products, we know that there is a lot of energy that can be produced in Africa that can be used for economic activities and industrial processes. So we know 60% of global solar, this is just an example, 60% of global solar resources are in Africa, and only 1% is currently being used in solar PV. And we also know that the energy resources have the potential to really over-meet the electricity demand by 2040 by a value of 1,000 times, which then there is a surplus of energy. Then the question becomes, how do we capture this surplus of energy? How do we capture this surplus potential and really bring it to Africa and for Africa? And another question, and I'd like to just pull us back to the economic condition to really see how renewable energy can help, is one of the leading structural challenges in development for Africa is that value addition and creation, at least the most valuable parts of supply chains, are not in the African continent. So if you look at the statistic, $207 per capita is the value that comes from manufacturing done from Africa. And Africa is a leading exporter of raw materials. So we can, with renewables, and we highlight this in the strategic intelligence brief, renewables can be used to bring value back to the African continent, to build up manufacturing. And maybe some point in the future, we are going to change these kinds of numbers. For example, I'm just going to highlight this. 70% of cobalt is produced in Africa. 66.5% of this is in the DRC. Great. But if you look at copper, DRC and Zambia process 7% and 1% respectively. And for cobalt, I think China is processing 60% of global cobalt. And there are attempts that African countries are trying to bring back this value of manufacturing to the continent, to their economies. Like DRC currently has extended a ban on cobalt exports, just so it can maintain, one, its local processing, artisanal processing, and two, the global price of cobalt, which was oversupplied because it was of the DRC extraction. So Suddenly, we see that still there are some blind spots that need to be highlighted that are very, very key. When I talk about challenges and opportunities, I like to look at blind spots because some of the solutions that are really brought up over and over again tend to be the same solutions over and over again. And the goal that I think one of the goals we should pull out from this event is how do we see things differently? So when we talk about skilling, the question is who are we skilling and what are we teaching them? How do we skill the right demographic? Africa is a very youthful population, and only 26.3% of everyone who's youthful gets a university degree. And it's a very staggering statistic. So how can youth be positioned in a way that they can get a university degree or some kind of technical training equivalent to a university degree to then lead to renewable energy penetration? And then, like I said before, around 28% of government revenue from Africa is being used to pay for international debt. So how can we come up with a kind of financing for renewable energy that reduces burden on public finance so that the public finance can be used for social good, like boosting education, reducing poverty, increasing food security, all these social services that are very crucial to actually support economic development and industrialization. So some of the key messages: renewable energy is the best placed form of energy to lead Africa's industrialization. The potential is there, the resources are there. And still, this potential must extend beyond natural resources and renewable energy potential and the critical minerals. We need to start looking at the end users beyond the energy system supply chain. Local value creation must be at the center of industrialization, because if the value continues to remain outside of the continent, then Africa will continue to be trapped in this poor development cycle. And still, there is no single solution for the continent, and structural challenges need to be addressed. Africa is very diverse. The economies are very diverse. As a Kenyan, I can tell you the economy of Nairobi is quite different from economies outside that country. So the solutions have to be tailored, and the structural challenges need to be tailored to structural solutions to the challenges need to be tailored to these kinds of diversities. Thank you. So I think now we can go to the panel, and hopefully some of the things I've said will be very useful for the discussion.
Thank you very much, Frank. Yes, I think indeed we see a disconnect, right? A massive potential in terms of land, in terms of population, in terms of renewable resources and critical minerals. But basically, when we're looking at the economic indicators and industrialization indicators, clearly an untapped potential. So I'm really happy to now bring in different perspectives from different players, and I'll invite the panelists here. We have Kudagwase Manyonyo, who's a just transition advisor from Parashift Africa. Asteria Marcus, who's program support officer at SACRI, the South Africa Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. Laura Corcoran, who's Chief Operating Officer of Aptec Africa, and bringing an industry voice right from a renewable energy technology side here. And Olivia Lamenya, who's Advisor for Climate and Logistics at the Kuhne Climate Center, but has worked a lot in e-mobility in Eastern Africa specifically. So I'm super excited to have you with me. And I think to kick us off, I would like to I mean, admittedly, when I looked at the strategic intel brief and saw like government revenues, 27% of government revenues in Africa are used to basically service international debts. On the other hand, we see lots of resources, and we need to recognize that lots of the raw material is being exported without directly adding a value to the continent. So maybe Kuda, may I turn to you first and just hear your thoughts on what are the big challenges that are preventing or to move from a raw product economy to a finished goods economy? and that is creating local value. So yes, challenges, and maybe also what are the levers?
Hi, Rana, and hi, everyone. Thank you for that. Just to check that you can hear me
Yes.
before I go on. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, no, I think it's a big question, but yet so simple to answer, right? At the end of the day, um, why we are not adding values because everyone else wants to add value based on our raw materials. At the end of the day, that's the base of this conversation. You know, it's a hurtful truth, but it's the honest truth. But the question then becomes, what do we need to do to change that, right? That narrative, that mode of activity that leads to value chains or value addition being done outside the continent constantly. And I think we should start off from the point of view that no one's going to develop Africa if it's not Africans, and we should always own that control over our own narrative. What you've seen in terms of a lot of foreign investment that has come over the last 20, 30 years, at the very least, since most independence of the continent, the narrative changed from investors to we are helping build Africa, but the reality is that is not the case, right? So in terms of renewable energy and industrialization, currently, as of 2023, there's about 80 gigawatts of renewables on the continent in totality. But for Africa to actually get to a point of having 100% renewable energy, we need 3,500 gigawatts. And that can be done by about 2050. There's a great paper that we wrote at PowerShift Africa called Africa Energy Leadership, and I'm willing to share that. And what we do in this paper, we're basically trying to show the potential that is the renewable energy that people do understand, but modeling it and seeing what that means. And sometimes I think is there lack of a vision from the African point of view that it really limits what we understand in terms of what can be done from actually getting value chains on the continent. And in our own modelings, we realize that by getting to 3,500 gigawatts of development, you're looking at about 5.4 million energy jobs across the continent. You're also looking at least $3 trillion worth of savings in terms of investment are moving away from fossil fuels, because that's also something else that's not spoken about a lot, that it's way more cost effective to invest in renewable energy compared to fossil fuels, especially on the African continent where there's not too much of fossil fuel infrastructure. So in owning that narrative and having visions of we need 3,500 gigawatts, what does that mean? And I think I'll close off this opening conversation from my point of view to say that we need to focus on backbone infrastructure, and that is looking at what value chains really lead to outsized impacts. And I think Frank just gave. Oh, sorry. Give me a second. Sorry about that. I'm at my sister's house. That was a phone. I'll just carry on. Frank just made a point around the amount of industrialization that is not on the continent. And I'll give you another statistic that shows you the industrialization poverty on the continent. On average, globally, there's about 220 kgs of steel that is consumed, especially in Europe and USA. Whereas in Africa, we only consume 30 kgs, which is basically 14% below the global average. In health terms, if Africa was a human being, would have kwashiorkor. Because we literally do not eat enough of steel of the continent for us to actually have any form of development. So what does that mean? It means that the steel value chain is critical to having any form of renewable energy. And when we speak about steel, we're thinking about transmission and distribution grids, conductors, transformers, switchgear, pylons, the boring stuff. You know, it's not as sexy as electrical vehicles, I get that. But this is what you actually mean when we talk about energy access and energy transformation. Right. And that means we can use some of those raw materials, the critical minerals that Frank spoke to, chromium from South Africa and Zimbabwe, bauxite, manganese from Mozambique and Guinea, because this is the utensils that you need, the utensils that have actually built up a lot of the steel infrastructure and the rest of the world that has come from this continent. And I'll stop with this, my favorite story for the last year, which happened about 2 years ago. So there was a drought in Zambia and Zimbabwe where the hydropower could not basically power both countries. Whereas at the same time, the El Nino that was happening in Southern Africa led to an El Nino in East Africa, and Tanzania had way too much water. And the the dams in Tanzania had to let go of electricity and power because there was no interconnector combining Tanzania and Zambia. A simple interconnector between two neighboring countries that is now being currently worked on, because that is a backbone infrastructure that we need to work on. And hopefully by focusing on this backbone infrastructure, we'll see a better development that we need. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Kuda, and thanks also for the perfect leeway to you, Asteria. Regional collaboration, I mean, we clearly see like its resources, regional policies, strategies, and vision. I guess like also thought leadership and leadership is fundamental, but it's not enough at the national level. Regional collaboration is necessary. So I would like to hear your views from Sakri's side. How do you bring the governments together to work together, work on the backbone infrastructure, but probably also are there any attempts or strategies to strategically link the energy topic to the economic development and industrialization topic?
Yes, thank you very much. Maybe I need to introduce myself. I'm Asteria Marcus. I'm Project Support Officer at SACRI, and SACRI stands for SADC Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. We are basically working on we are supporting our member states, the 16 member states for the SADC region, to accelerate or to promote the renewable energy technologies as well as energy efficiency. So this is to meet to address the issue of energy security and other aspects. So what we are doing basically is to ensure that the policies, the energy policies at the national level are harmonized. I think that also answers to the question you posed. So we bring together the member states when we are developing standards, for example, to ensure that all the developments in the country and the products that are entering the country are harmonized or meet the common specification or requirements. So in terms of industrialization and strategies, yes, we are supporting the implementation of renewable energy and energy efficiency strategy and action plan. And this is mainly what we are always focusing on when we are trying to ensure that all the policies across the region are aligned to the priorities and the goals that were set by the region, to ensure that we have the common goals and we are the developments are aligning to those priorities. So yeah, basically that's what we do. And in terms of industrialization, yes, we do have a lot of activities also that are happening in the region in terms of we have an industrialization week where we bring together all the industries, and then we get to know the market better and improve the market. Yeah, basically that's what I can say for now.
Thank you. Allow me a quick follow-up question, because I know that from Sakri's side, you're specifically also focusing on this. And so I think, Kuda, you highlighted some of the main material or basic material for the backbone. So like steel, for instance, which sometimes we tend to forget because we directly look at the renewable technologies and batteries and EVs, etc. But then Frank also clearly highlighted the importance of human capital and skilled workforce, etc. So do you work together in the region? What are the strategies to basically build up the skilled workforce and really the foundation for renewable-based economy and industry?
Well, for industrial-based economy, I mean, we have a couple of strategies. The renewable energy and energy efficiency strategy, and we also have the regional energy strategy and action plan, which also encompasses, includes all these sort of developments. And we are working together in terms of mapping resources, and we have also some projects that are related to ensuring that we understand the potential that we have, and the developments or the investors understand what what is existing or what is happening in the region and where to go. For example, we had the project on green hydrogen. We developed an atlas, an African atlas, in collaboration with the West African region, and this was funded by the German government. So we have identified the potential of renewable resources and also water resources for the production of green hydrogen in the region. So these are some of the activities that we have done. And we are also currently working on mapping wind resources in order to see how we can, where are the potentials and how we can develop this kind of resources.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Laura, I'm coming over to you. You're an industry player, basically. We hear a lot about value chains, building up the supply chains, investing in manufacturing, not only looking at renewable energy technologies, but along the supply chains and also green industrialization, basically. Could you share your view as one of these industry players?
Sure, I would love to. First of all, I kind of want to give the context that I wear two different hats. So I'm CEO of Aptec Africa, which is an engineering, procurement, and construction company for solar projects. But we have a subsidiary company called Solar Power, which is setting up to be East Africa's first production scale lithium-ion battery assembly facility here within Uganda. So because of our experience in the solar industry, we do a lot of installations using lithium-ion batteries, and we've really come across issues of supply, timely servicing, and the cost of servicing. So there have been instances where we have a battery with a problem and our supplier says, okay, ship the battery back to Asia so we can check it, and then we'll send you a new one. Well, that costs more than the battery itself, right? So we really strongly believe in localizing these services and these assembly facilities so that East Africa can have access to high quality lithium-ion batteries. So that's what Solar Power is doing. We're setting up here within Uganda, and we're producing lithium-ion batteries both for stationary storage like mini grids or commercial industrial applications or even residential applications, but also lithium-ion batteries for e-mobility. So here in East Africa, we have the boda or a motorcycle. And there's a lot of these e-bodas that are coming here in Uganda that need batteries. It's a critical part of the supply chain. So we're manufacturing them here within Uganda. So we're trying to localize that as much as possible. There's a lot of challenges along the way. Maybe I can speak to some of those if that's helpful. So Uganda has very good policy to support manufacturing. But what we've found is even if the policy is in place, it doesn't necessarily mean that people on the ground are able to enact it in a way that actually supports manufacturing. So for example, even though the manufacturing of lithium-ion battery for renewable energy applications is a high priority for the Ugandan government, permitting, example through NEMA, if an application goes and sits on the desk of NEMA for 2 years, that kills private sector and that makes manufacturing incredibly difficult. So we don't see necessarily those policies being supported on the ground. The same thing for like the importation. We talk about how raw materials are necessary. So right now we are not making lithium-ion cells. We're still importing those from Asia. So there's an importation process. So when we import our raw materials, even though the Ugandan government has really great like duty remission schemes set up for the products that we're importing, if the URA people on the ground don't have the knowledge about those HS codes, which means that our materials are sitting in customs for 6 weeks or more, that kills manufacturing. So there is like a huge gap between what is policy and what is actually happening on the ground. And so in order for these systems to be put into place and in order for us to localize the supply, there still has to be a lot of changes, a lot of learning on the ground so that we can close that gap and we can make manufacturing possible here in East Africa.
Mm-hmm. Allow me a direct follow-up question, 2 direct follow-up questions. Learning on the ground and the changes. Which learning on the ground? What key changes? So if you choose 3, what are the ones? And another question, manufacturing requires energy. which energy do you use for your manufacturing facility?
I'll do the second one first because I'll remember it. Okay, so Uganda is actually hydro. Their entire grid is hydro, so it's clean energy to begin with. But we are looking to solarize our facility once we're able to get set up so that that can also mitigate with those costs. But I will say that one of the challenges is reliable electricity, because unfortunately in Uganda, even though the electricity is there, there's some issues with the distribution. So we might have power outages for 4 hours every day. And when you're manufacturing, that makes it incredibly difficult. It reduces your productivity. It makes it really hard for you to compete. So that's one of the challenges. Would love for it to be addressed. You talked about learning. So there's learning kind of in multiple areas, right? One, we need additional training, like for example, for URA people to understand the components we're importing. What are those HS codes? What are the purpose? When we say deep cell cycle batteries, what does that mean? So that we can import materials in a timely way so that we can produce them, so that we can manufacture. The other thing with learning is that this is a new technology to East Africa. People aren't building these necessarily, especially stationary storage. As far as I know, we're the first ones here that are really doing it. And so there's a huge gap. We are bringing in lots of young people for Solar Power. 80% of our staff right now are female. And we're training them to be battery technicians, but this is something we kind of have to do from scratch. And this is a huge learning gap. And so we have a huge opportunity for support and for knowledge transfer and all these things, but it really needs to be there. So I think your first question was challenges. I would say electricity. I would say infrastructure. So making sure there's the transportation routes, importation, and then finance. If we want to bring manufacturing here to Africa, there has to be financing available. Regional development banks are not interested in financing startups like this. They're not interested. It's too high risk to go into manufacturing. Impact investors maybe, but they still want to see, how much you've sold in this, that, and the other. So if you're a startup, it's incredibly expensive and incredibly difficult to get started. So it would be wonderful if there was affordable financing. And when I say affordable, I would love the interest rates that the global north is getting. How about we get some 3 and 4% down here in the global south? That's what I would love. Haven't seen it. If anybody knows how we can get that, would love that. So yeah, access to finance is another big challenge that that we have come across. Yep.
Yeah, thank you very much for highlighting this. And also the access on finance is probably interesting to see whether access to finance for renewable energy technologies and supply and manufacturing, you see what are opportunities to bundle things potentially also. This is also a good leeway to you, Olivia, because what is also missing is the energy consumers, right? That at the same time are also the manufacturing potential, it's industrial players. What is your view from the e-mobility side? Because, and then also, I think, Laura, you mentioned the transportation routes. So maybe also some thoughts, Olivia, on observation. What is required along the supply chains? Sorry, along the logistics. I always think about Nigeria, largest African country, largest African population, but not one single logistics master or something like this.
No, the logistics masters do exist, and they are all over the continent. They just need to be found. I listened to Laura, and I'm so happy I'm not in the startup world anymore because I understand the challenges associated with that. A lot of the times when you think about manufacturing excellence and everything that Africa has, Africa is 10 to 15 years behind the rest of the world. China is ready now. Europe is ready 5 years. The States maybe 7, but when you start looking at where Africa is, when, I forget his name again, when Okoth said that there's 26% of youth coming out of the market who need to be educated, I understand that these guys are coming out, but they're not ready. So a lot of the startups end up starting to train these people in something that these guys never understood in school. So when you go back to thinking about it, supply chains need to redefine what kind of output we are bringing in terms of the skill set we're looking for. So capacity development really does need to change, and it really does need to bring in this angle of renewable energies. But then what does that mean? It means understanding supply chains. Most people make a business plan, renewable energies make a business plan, but they never thought about the supply chain. So what's the raw material? What's the finished goods? Where are we starting from? Where are we ending? About, for example, solar panels. How do those solar panels get to where they need to be for them to actually work? Most people didn't think about how to get them there. So they'll use a diesel vehicle to bring them there, and then they'll think, oh yeah, what did we do? We created a supply chain and we brought things in and we have zero emissions. No, you don't have zero emissions because you used vehicles that are still diesel driven. So what does your full supply chain look like? How are you then going about changing that supply chain to make sure that everything that you really, really do is clean? So these renewable energy things for me is very interesting because it changes the way we think about the way energy was previously generated. And now we are moving from a centralized situation to a decentralized situation. That's why guys are able to create as many jobs as possible. They're able to educate, capacitate a huge bunch of people. Women and youth who are maybe locked out of it are now being brought in droves, but they still do lack that capacity to develop themselves, that capacity to grow themselves. And honestly speaking, the guys, especially the guys in the startup world, I think are overwhelmed the most because they're the ones who are receiving these people. And then instead of growing the business, they're spending a lot of time and energy developing stuff, which is time and energy and maybe finances that they could have spent somewhere else. And then somebody, I can't remember who, my brain is moving at a million miles a second, talked about policy. Fully agree. When you start crossing borders, something might work seamlessly in one country. The minute you cross the border, because those border trade agreements, policies are not the same, things change drastically. So when we say East Africa, when we say, oh, DRC has locked down, somebody once was trying to map up manufacturing of this raw material that's coming out of the DRC, and they were like, why don't we do processing of this maybe in Kenya or in Rwanda, one of those countries, and see how that happens. When we started to define that supply chain, it was insane. There's a lot of skill that's missing. The way we extract that raw material is not as modernized as most people would assume it should be. So then it becomes a problem. The refining process and the skill set that, when you ask Asia, how long did it take you guys to develop this? Asia will tell you this is a 10-15 year project. Does Africa have 10-15 years to catch up? Then you start to hear terms like leapfrog. What does leapfrog mean for that development to happen? So you start thinking about all of these things, and these are so many blind spots that we are not all seeing. We are not all privileged to understand that they exist, but they exist. So in it, when you start thinking, when someone thinks about their supply chain and where it's going and where it's coming from, there is a lot. It's from the raw material all the way to the finished good. And sometimes the energy needed to generate the raw material is not the same amount of energy that's needed to do the finished good. So you have to think about it from that perspective, and then start to figure out these guys who are doing manufacturing, what do they really need? And the end user, what does he or she need? So like, when you go into e-mobility, a lot of the people are scared to join e-mobility because they assume that end of life has not been thought through. Most businesses are already thinking about end of life. We know that some of these batteries can be used for stored energy, which then becomes home energy supplies. So those are things which are already in play, but because there's not enough education, there's not enough knowledge in the market, it becomes difficult for people to understand. I've rambled a bit, so I'm not sure whether I've answered all the questions, but I hope I've touched on everything a little bit.
Yeah, you have touched on lots of things that I have like lots of follow-up questions, but I think thanks a lot for highlighting this part of end of life of batteries, because I think I see like there is basically an ongoing discussion what is happening. We need to import basically the goods. We depend, so we are closing it, but basically importing also some of this material mean that in the end it is locally and regionally available if you put in place the right recycling, recovering supply chains, and you can basically really build on this material on a continuous way. I think maybe building, so I'm basically going to turn to the two of you, Kuda and Asteria. Having heard Laura and Olivia looking more from the industrial side and supply chains, startup manufacturing. Your thoughts? You don't need to answer everything, obviously. You pick what has inspired you.
No, I think I am inspired around the conversation around supply chains, and I think we should really understand what supply chains means. And we like to call it sideways linkages or backward linkages. Reason being, there is value in the supply chain, and we should start thinking about it in that sense. That's where the jobs are actually created. It's not at the end; it's at the building steps to get to the final solar panel and the likes, and that's what's important. And why this becomes important, at least from an African point of view, and you can see this in the Africa Green Mineral Strategy, it puts a strong emphasis to remind people that not every community or every country has to have a mineral for you to be part of the renewable energy process. And there's a misconception within this renewable energy dichotomy or renewable energy to industry focus. Everyone assumes that you need to have a mineral, and that's not the case. You can be part of a very important linkage to a certain mineral or up downstream and the likes, and there's not enough of that happening, I think, in terms of this industrialization conversation we're having. Everyone seems to be desperate to find the mineral first for them to start thinking of themselves in the supply chain, and that's unfortunate. It's impractical too, because at the end of the day, that's my nephew, as I mentioned before. So there's this impracticality of it where instead of being part of the solution, you see some governments are not willing, for example, to open up their markets, to agree to the AFCFTA, to ensure that it's easier to trade between regions and provinces because of that fear that we don't have a mineral, we want to protect what we have. So I think that's really inspiring me from what I just heard, that the supply chains don't have to be the mineral or the direct mineral chain. There's a lot more happening on the sides, and that could be equally as valuable. And I'll leave with one story. And I think we all saw this when Mr. Trump decided to show people what trade policy can look like if you try to play around with it. And they showed how one instrument crosses Mexico, USA, and Canada at least 7 to 10 times in the automotive industry. We should start thinking like that. It should be okay for one instrument to go from Kenya to Uganda, to South Africa, to Zambia, and then finish off in Kenya. What would that look like? And that's where we see the actual value. In economics, it's called the multiplier effect. And we have not invested a lot in terms of explaining what that could look like. And hopefully we can do a lot more of that. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, and for highlighting this. I think that's also in the brief, maybe just to, this is exactly the starting point, was to look at, okay, what are the regional, renewable energy resources, critical minerals, but then also acknowledging for the fact that critical minerals do not exist in all African countries. You see, renewable potential does exist in all African countries, but all African countries have the potential for manufacturing goods, you see, and being part of regional and global trade. And that's basically a part we very often do not look at. And it also requires basically looking beyond only the energy policies, regulations, standards. So Asteria, governments have a key role to play here. Also, I think at the regional level on the alignment. What did the conversation trigger from your side, or trigger on your side?
Yes, thank you very much. It's very, these are the cries that we normally hear everywhere in every meetings or every interaction that we have with the market players. There are a lot of issues. The more we are advancing with the renewable energy adoption, the more challenges we are facing. So we are busy as working with the governments and also inviting also the private sector to work together to create that enabling environment in terms of financing, policies, standards in order to protect the market. And we also work on the procurement guidelines. Under the energy efficient lighting and appliances, we have developed multiple standards for cooling appliances and also for lighting products, including solar panels. So, and also under that same project, we have also developed e-waste management guidelines. So, in order to know how to deal with the waste, the e-waste issues. So, this is addressing the Olivia's question. Although we did not necessarily cover the battery issues, but most of the waste e-waste are covered under the guideline, those guidelines. So what is the most important thing is to work with the private sector. We know the government is already battling with energy poverty. There are a lot of issues. So we are bringing in the private sector so that we can work together so that we can address all these issues. And they are the one, especially the market players, they are the one who knows the market better and the issues that they are facing. So we normally engage them, we work together with them when we are developing this kind of standards so that we can protect the market together and for them also to understand what is required. One of the issue that was I think was addressed about the value chain is also that we also need to protect, you know, the market in terms of the products that are coming in, because we realize that some of the market players bypass even the international standards. So as a regional and regional organizations, we are now working on also capacitating test laboratories so that even when the fake certificates are provided, they will be able, you know, to test those products to ensure that they meet the requirements. And definitely we are dealing with a lot of issues, including even systems that are not working. They were installed and then they later stopped working. So we are also working on those issues, addressing the issue of capacity, you know, training the local experts so that they can be able to rectify the faults that are being faced in the energy systems, maybe solar mini grids, and also training the solar installers under the Soul Train project. We are also having some training programs for people who are installing the solar thermal technologies. So we are really trying, and together with the private sector, I like emphasizing on the private sector because they can really play a very huge role on this, because the government is really already overwhelmed with energy poverty, with 50% only access to energy across the SADC region. Really, access to energy is the most critical thing, but the need is there and the interest is there in renewable energy. But the more we deploy them, the more challenges we are facing, especially with waste management. I think that's what
I hope, however, that the message has also been clear that we're obviously learning and facing new challenges, but also building lots of opportunities. So I've taken a bit of time of the Q&A. I will, however, mention some of the easy questions in the chat. So first of all, there was a discussion, Kuda, with you on the interconnector in between Zambia and Zimbabwe, right? No, that's correct. Affordable energy, the Kenya-Tanzania bit is complete, yes. Zambia-Tanzania interconnector project will enable Zambia to access more sustainable, affordable energy. This is good because, Laura, you spoke about 4 hours of load shedding, but Zambia and Zimbabwe have up to 18 hours of load shedding. So I think this shows that energy is energy access, but also transformative energy for economic activities, industrialization. There was a question on the governance, actually. Apologies to all if I'm not going to address all the questions, but there was one question: to what extent governance is an issue, and is governance a setback for Africa's development of renewable energy, and how can we improve it? This is one question, and which I would like to pick. And there was another one, which is, are there any regulatory measures being put in place to support the local manufacturing companies? Can we see, like, can we develop something, a standard that can be mainstreamed? And also the question about the currently the industry is flooded with Chinese products. So how do we address this? So Kuda, you have your hand up. Start with you.
Just a quick response to the first and the last question. I got very excited about governance because that's what I kind of do. So around the setback is, sorry, just to, yeah, I think there's a devil in the room, which is our governments are doing a lot more for fossil fuel industry compared to renewable energy. That's the reality of the matter in terms of, in the language that is used in the private sector, de-risking fossil fuel investment and the likes and the likes. The priorities with fossil fuel investment, and that's the unfortunate truth. Most of the conversations I have, we're always told, oh, we want a energy mix for everything, but you can tell from their priority, it's gas, it's coal, and it's oil. If the same focus was done for renewable energy, there would have been a lot more progress right now. So this is not to say that they can't do it. I think right now there are political decisions that are being made to prefer fossil fuel development, which is unfortunate. That's where we come in to try make a case for alternatives. And probably we're failing in there right now, unfortunately. But I think that's more what's happening. It's not really a governance issue, it's more of a political decision that is being made for quite a number of reasons. And then on the issue of China, we are allowing China to flood our markets. There's the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. Our governments have agreed. They have signed on to agreements with China, giving them access to the African markets for a lot of these things. And that's the reality. It's not a secret. It is not like China's doing this nicodemously, as we say in Zimbabwe, like they're hiding. Our governments are inviting them. So what this is then to say, we need to change the policy. So at least at Power Shift Africa, we are doing quite a lot of work at FOCAC level to try get our governments to change the policy. There is some conversations happening about that. China is trying to push back or pull back on some of those things that they're flooding in, but they now want to flood in steel instead of flooding in phones. So there's a lot happening in that. So what this is to say is that we need to also really work with our governments when they're negotiating with China to really be a bit more firm in terms of what they want to protect in terms of industries and the likes, and we won't see a flooding of these markets. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else on these two questions or other questions basically in the chat? Olivia.
So I think there's the bad side and there's the good side to all of these conversations. So some of the work we do is with the corridors. So if you think about entry points, so there's the Northern Corridor, the Central Corridor, and we do quite a bit of work with those corridors. And the way these guys ratify themselves to be united as countries is kind of interesting because then it changes the way you influence governments. So when you're dealing with them and then they make rules and those rules enable entry and exit to make sense, then you start to see governments trying to change a little bit in terms of like policy, HS codes, because now they want them all harmonized and they need to all make sense. But then at the end of the day, you have a situation where private sector will always move faster than government. By the time governments realize what's going on, private sector has made a lot of changes within that space. And that's the right pressure that government needs so that they can make these changes faster and faster and faster. If we don't support the private sector, then the private sector will never be able to drive these conversations or push the right agenda that makes the changes to happen. So if I think about, like, for example, just in the space of e-mobility between the year 2020 and 2025, in Kenya alone, there are now 14,000 electric vehicles on the road. But in 2020, there were only 63. That's just because private sector has been resilient in pushing that agenda and saying, this is what we want to do. When you go to a corridor, at a corridor level, you start to hear corridors say, we want to be resilient, we want to be clean, we have these renewable energies. How do we map them? Where do we put them? And we're not just doing it for one country, we're doing it for all 7 and 6 countries that are attached to us. How do we make this a one conversation that everybody else must adhere to. So then that becomes the interesting side, because sometimes it's difficult to convince one government to do stuff. But if you have something that puts them all together and has a driving factor that allows them to do stuff, then maybe the change becomes an easier one.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Laura, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I just kind of along that lines, actually, I want to circle back to something that Olivia said earlier when you were talking about e-waste, specifically like with e-mobility. So one of the projects that Solar Power is working on is it's taking cells from like e-mobility bikes and repurposing them for stationary storage, right? So we're creating these second life batteries, and we have grant support for this, right? We're just piloting it now, but we hope that at the end, we're going to have a solution that can hopefully replace lead acid batteries at the same price. So we're working on that. But when it comes to policy and blocks, because these second life batteries are using used cells, they're technically classified as e-waste. And so when it comes to cross-border transportation, say we want to sell them to Kenya or to South Sudan, it's incredibly difficult, almost impossible to get them across borders. So like, when we talk about advocacy, when we talk about policy, when we talk about like East Africa working together, things like that can be addressed that can really support with the process as well, so that people have an understanding of what are these second life batteries, how they're helping the environment, how they can help with the energy transition, and then to create policy that's more friendly to that. So there's a lot of opportunity there.
Thank you so much. I am so sad to end the discussion here. We are going to jump into the breakout rooms, and we'll come back to all convene. I would like to thank all four of you for sharing your insights. And I think it's very clear that there will be lots of follow-up discussions. We'll definitely need to dig deeper into supply chains and connect this to corridors, but also connect this to full value chains and not only the energy. And so maybe Asteria, in the future, you'll have Sakri and some of the transport players and the like infrastructure and trade, etc., coming together in the region along the corridor strategies, because yeah, it's an economy-wide topic. So thanks a lot, and over to Frank and Vivu for the next part of this rendezvous.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you especially to to all the people who've been sending questions and reactions on the chat. So I am also encouraging all our speakers to reply to whatever you see is relevant to you, and continue the conversation with everybody in all our participants. So before we segue the next part, which is breakout rooms where all of you as participants can continue to converse and engage in this discussion, Frank and I would like to invite you to take a few seconds to quickly write in the chat what have you heard, about what inspired you so far. So what I would suggest is take 30 seconds, right? It could be 2 words, 5 words, it could be 1 sentence. Type something up, and when we say send it. So don't send anything, just type it up really quickly. 1 to 5 words, a sentence. What has inspired you so far, especially after this super inspirational panel discussion? And then I will keep quiet so you can think and write. Most people are typing, I guess. Shall we say this is a fair amount of time for people to think and type, Frank?
Yeah, I think this is fair, but I haven't seen anything yet.
No, because everyone's waiting to send it.
Okay.
Okay, so 3, 2, 1, press send or enter.
Wow.
Wow. Yes, and go on sending it, of course. You don't have to. This is not the once and for all moment, but it's just really nice to, especially for our speakers, to hear what the people have been thinking based on what they've been saying. So for the next part, so we're gonna put people into different breakout rooms, and before I, give it to Frank to explain what guiding question everyone will be discussing, I'll quickly go through the logistics. So in a moment, you'll receive an invitation to your breakout room. The rooms have been assigned randomly, so chances are that you'll end up with people that, work in different sectors, hopefully in different regions. So there's a lot of cross sectoral and regional talk. There will be a REN21 colleague in each of these rooms, so that it's in case you're stuck or you need some support, you can also reach out to them. If you would rather have this conversation in French, just stay back in the main room, and my colleague Hala will do live translation and help, or rather have the conversation in French. So now now I'll ask you to introduce the topic, Frank.
Yeah, so the topic for all breakout rooms is, where do you see the most significant opportunity for renewable energy to drive green industrialization and job creation? It will be sent in the chat, it will be in the breakout room, and when you're thinking about this question, answering this question, think about your context. If you're African, think about African context. If you're not, the countries, the regions, respond. You can respond as yourself, you can respond as a country, as a region, as an organization. Yeah, so, and have fun as well.
Excellent stuff. Thanks both. So I'm going to open up the breakout rooms now. You're in quite small groups, so there's lots of breakout rooms, 6 to 7 people per room. There'll be somebody from REN21 in that room to help facilitate the conversation and capture any key things. You're going to have only about 12 to 15 at most minutes before we pull you back and ask for, what were the light bulbs that went off in that conversation for you. So I'm going to open the breakout rooms now. You'll be magically whisked away. However, if you only joined in the last half an hour or so, you might not be invited into a breakout room immediately. I organize that for you very, very quickly. So on that note, everybody okay? Thumbs up. Nice stuff. Off you go. So if you are not in a breakout room, bear with me. I'm going to send you to a breakout room and you will be magically whisked away to join the conversation, and you'll be there imminently. So bear with me 2 seconds. I'm just finding you a good sized room. So it's looking good, almost there. So you should be now being whisked away into breakout rooms. Just 2 more of you here, just finding a decent sized room so we're not all in the same place. And we're off. So you've all now been invited into a breakout room. And if you are here, feel free to chat in French or let me know if you're having any problems getting into the room.
Hello.
Hey, so Hala, it's you and me, and that's it. Everybody else is in a breakout room. They're nice and small rooms as well. So hopefully there's lots of good conversation.
Oh, there was a Sulaiman here. Oh, okay. So no French speakers.
So, well, somebody's just joining the room. I don't know if they're coming back or if they've.
Yeah, maybe remind them if they need French, I'm here.
Yes. So, so far, it's just you and me. So I need to let somebody in. Somebody's just joined. So give me 2 seconds, participants. So, that looks like they're in problems with their connection. So Here we go. Hello. So I'm not sure if you've joined this main room so that you can speak in French. If so, welcome. Hala. We'll be able to converse with you in French, or if you have just joined and you're wondering what's going on and where everyone is, in which case I can put you into a breakout room. So if it's possible, are you able to come off mute and tell us?
Dossé? Vous préférez qu'on parle en français?
Oui, oui, oui. Alors, comment on peut parler français? Il n'y a pas de problème.
Voilà. Oui.
Comment? Bonjour, bonsoir.
Bonjour. Vous appelez de quelle partie de l'Afrique?
Je suis togolais, je vis au
Ah,
Togo. Je suis le directeur exécutif de l'ONG ADET, Amis des étrangers au Togo.
super. Moi, j'ai vécu au Togo. Vous avez un
Ah,
petit pays.
donc dans quelle ville ça? Lomé?
Oui, dans Lomé.
Ah, je vois, je vois.
Bon, bienvenue.
Great to meet you.
Merci beaucoup.
Ok.
Alors, on peut converser en français et c'était à propos de comment on voit l'industrialisation verte et le passage aux renouvelables dans l'industrie et pour créer voilà, des emplois dans le secteur des renouvelables.
Oui, je suivais quand ma connexion était coupée et je suis revenu.
Oui,
Ce que je voudrais dire, je vais vous prier de bien m'écouter.
oui.
D'accord. J'ai l'habitude de dire quelque chose.
Oui.
Quand on parle de l'Afrique, l'Afrique n'est pas Afrique. Afrique, c'est des Afriques.
Bien sûr.
Qu'est-ce que je voudrais dire par là? C'est-à-dire que comme l'Afrique a été démembrée et que chaque pays est souverain, cette souveraineté va jusqu'au sous-sol de ces pays. Alors, nous savons tous que l'Afrique est riche en matières premières pour les énergies renouvelables, mais chaque gouvernement a la priorité sur sa matière première. Ce qui fait que s'il faut développer l'industrialisation en matière renouvelable, alors on est obligé d'avoir l'accord des dirigeants du pays en question qui acceptent exploiter alors ces gisements pour des produits renouvelables que nous souhaitons.
Ouais.
Alors, c'est difficile de parler au nom de toute l'Afrique quand la responsabilité est partagée. Donc, c'est pour vous dire que, par exemple, si nous prenons la ZLECAf, tous les gouvernements se sont réunis pour créer la ZLECAf. Mais pour adopter les tests pour que la ZLECAf marche, ça devient un problème pour eux. Vous voyez la complication.
Oui.
Maintenant, on tourne vers la Chine et on signe la coopération avec la Chine pour recevoir les produits chinois. Alors qu'il y a beaucoup de produits chinois qui sont déjà venus s'installer en Afrique ici, mais qui ne fonctionnent pas. Ça ne fonctionne pas. Donc, la qualité, ça devient un problème. Après avoir signé ce contrat avec eux, ils crient maintenant sur la qualité. La qualité. Vous avez vous-même des matières premières pour fabriquer sur place ces produits-là. C'est pourquoi moi, j'ai l'habitude de féliciter l'Ouganda, dont le président a décidé de transformer ces produits sur place.
Oui.
Oui, ça va faire évoluer seulement l'Ouganda et non l'Afrique. À moins que l'Ouganda maintenant traite avec des affaires commerciales, donc traite avec les autres pays. Donc maintenant, les défis financiers sont là. Et pour les chaînes de valeur, comme je le dis, que c'est des Afriques et que tout se repose sur un pays donné, donc ça fait que c'est le pays-là qui doit commencer par signer les contrats d'installation d'industrie, par exemple, de batteries. Et maintenant, ces industries de batteries vont produire des produits qui vont être distribués dans tous les autres pays africains. Mais est-ce que le marché africain est vraiment protégé? Ça aussi, c'est un autre problème. Parce que normalement, les pays africains doivent décider en commun accord que les produits fabriqués en Afrique doivent rester en Afrique et personne n'a le droit alors d'aller prendre d'autres produits alors d'autres pays, d'autres continents. Bon, vous voyez, donc,
Je n'entends plus Dossé.
Donc, je disais que, bon, donc les pays prennent les décisions, les gouvernements prennent des décisions sans le consentement de la population. Donc, c'est eux qui décident, ils prennent les décisions et nous sommes là, nous sommes obligés de subir. Maintenant, sur le terrain, est-ce qu'il y a la volonté politique de travailler avec tous les acteurs? Si oui, vous avez des besoins énergétiques. Vous êtes sûr que vous avez des besoins énergétiques. Pourquoi, si vous voyez que quelqu'un est dans le domaine, pourquoi ne pas l'inviter et l'associer pour réussir? Hein, pour réussir. Donc, on sent qu'il y a une protection, c'est nous seuls qui allons faire, mais on ne fait pas bien aussi. Et on reste là et on tourne en rond. On tourne en rond. C'est vraiment difficile. Donc, moi, j'ai l'habitude de dire à nos frères africains qu'il faut se réveiller. Il faut se réveiller. Aujourd'hui, le besoin énergétique est crucial. Et c'est un problème important pour le développement. Sans les énergies, on ne peut pas se développer. Oui. Voilà. Donc, vous voyez, par exemple, nous sommes à 5 ans de 2030. Si je prends le cas du Togo, nous sommes à 5 ans de 2030 et peut-être moins encore de 5 ans. Mais l'objectif du gouvernement est que d'ici 5 ans, d'ici 2030, que tout le Togo sera électrifié. Et jusqu'au jour d'aujourd'hui, on n'est qu'à 30,5% d'électrification rurale. Vous voyez?
Oui.
Donc, vous voyez, alors que nous aussi, nous sommes là sur le terrain, nous voulons les accompagner, mais si tu ne sais pas faire, on va te créer plutôt de problèmes. Donc, voilà la situation. Moi, j'aurais souhaité que chaque pays ayant de gisement d'énergie renouvelable se prononce clairement et que la ZELECAF aussi soit vraiment opérationnelle. Sans ça, on est obligé de faire des prêts et d'aller payer des produits chinois pour venir remplir l'Afrique avec tous les problèmes que ça peut apporter.
Absolument.
Bon, moi, je traitais avec les Allemands, mais le problème qui existe là-bas aussi, c'est qu'ils ont des produits de qualité, mais c'est cher.
Ouais.
C'est la charité qui fait que leur produit ne peut pas couler bien. Sinon, en matière d'expertise, ils sont bien.
Ouais.
Et Londres aussi, les États-Unis aussi, ils sont bien. Mais c'est le prix. Hein, c'est le prix. Voilà. Donc, vous voyez.
Merci, Dossé.
Donc, j'ai beaucoup parlé, excusez-moi.
Ne vous inquiétez pas, non, c'est très illuminant. Vinesha, vous voulez contribuer aussi à cette question? Je peux la répéter si vous le souhaitez.
Oui, s'il vous plaît, bonjour.
Bonjour. Alors, on est en train de discuter sur les opportunités que vous voyez dans le domaine de énergie renouvelable, industrialisation et industrialisation verte et emploi vert.
Moi, je suis de l'île Maurice, donc j'ai appris sur le webinaire hier. J'étais sur GWNet et c'est Franck qui nous a partagé le lien. Donc, j'ai un petit peu raté le début de la session, mais moi, ce que je peux partager, je pense qu'il faut avoir une synergie au niveau de l'Afrique, l'Union africaine, pour qu'on puisse avoir un bargaining power. J'ai pas tout suivi. Donc, moi, ce que je peux dire, s'il n'y a pas d'union, il n'y aura pas de force, il n'y aura pas de bargaining power, on aurait pu peut-être créer une association, une organisation pour qu'on puisse rassembler nos forces et créer des policies et aussi de voir comment est-ce qu'on peut collaborer. Et bon, comme je vous ai dit, j'ai raté le début de la session, mais on nous a expliqué que l'Afrique a des gisements de minéraux qui sont utilisés pour l'énergie renouvelable, pour fuel the industry. Mais les produits nous achetons nos produits de la Chine. J'ai bien compris que nous avons plusieurs problèmes au niveau de même démarrer nos industries, vu que, comme Laura disait, en Ouganda, même s'ils utilisent l'énergie renouvelable, il y a des coupures de courant de 4 heures. Donc, pour pouvoir soutenir une industrie, ça ne va pas être possible. Il y a aussi d'autres soucis comme le capacity building qu'ils ont mentionné, mais je pense qu'il faudra avoir une synergie au niveau de l'Afrique en entier pour pouvoir build up the industry. Nous avons des possibilités, nous avons le vent, nous avons les minéraux. Il faudra travailler pour qu'on puisse faire du capacity building. Il faudra qu'il y ait un réel engouement de politique pour qu'on puisse aller de l'avant. C'est tout ce que je peux faire pour le moment. Merci beaucoup.
Merci à vous.
So, folks, I always feel the need to apologize for the fact that you get ruthlessly pulled out of breakout rooms mid-conversation. It's always the way. There is never enough time. We take a while to get going, and then when the conversation's flowing, somebody then goes, right, conversation's over. So I can only but apologize, but unfortunately time is not on our side right now, so we are gonna start wrapping things up. So I'm gonna just say that the breakout rooms are now closed, and I'm going to invite Frank to share some thoughts, share some insights. Frank, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
I will spotlight you, my friend. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you. And just wanted to know very quickly, because we have 5 minutes, and as I'm talking, please just write in the chat one of the key messages that you got from the breakout rooms, because we have 5 minutes. Maybe keep it 6 words maximum. I had very interesting from my breakout room. We realized that, you know, the bulk of the African economy is the informal economy that really is very difficult to tax. And if we are pushing renewable energy for economic development and industrialization, we have to remember that for instance, in Kenya's situation, 30% of the economy is informal. This has to also be taken care of, because we cannot leave a good chunk of the economy out. But yeah, and also just largely from the conversation that we've had today and all the insights, and Rana, please feel free to chime in as well, is the concept of having skills in a supply chain, I have to admit, was quite new to me. So how can we look at supply chains not as a pathway to move something to something to somewhere, but also a pathway to say, okay, I'm sending this kilogram of copper from Zimbabwe or Zambia to Morocco so that it can be used to make, I don't know, some two-wheel electric vehicle. How will it get there, and how do we train people to do that? And then another one was, how can people understand renewable energy enabling technologies when before that they were mostly fossil fuel technologies? So how do we skill on this transition as well? So, you know, having that supply chain perspective has also been helpful. Rana, if you have something quick to say, because we have
Yeah, I think we had in our group indeed also some discussion about fossil fuel versus renewable energy, and how to make some of the more technical discussions we're having meaningful and relevant to citizens, so to people. In this context, I think really the importance of narratives, and that I think one of the things we have not been good at is developing these impactful narratives, and we're basically competing with fossil fuel industry that has a very strong narrative about cost and jobs. So how to basically translate and build this up. In this context, also so Noah from UNIDO also brought in this part. I mean, we heard the link to electric or to the transport sector, but here it was about agriculture. So really this part of how to bring basically supply sectors and energy sectors together and build on synergies. And then I got cut off. There was, however, or Kuda, actually, you got cut off because you said, like, I believe in the power of people to be innovative when they are given energy. I just thought this was a really perfect ending. So energy as a driver for manufacturing, industrialization, economic activities, prosperous societies, but not any energy, but just renewable energy. And yeah, this is so some thoughts from our breakout.
Yeah. Okay, so now that we have 2 minutes, maybe I'll just close off very quickly. And I'll start off by saying that we have an Africa Community WhatsApp group. If you're in this call, I think, you know, it's relevant for you to be in the group. I've just sent the link to the Zoom chat, so please just join. And then if you haven't received the recording for the last rendezvous that we had, just, you know, send me an email or reach out to REN21 in one way or another, and it will be sent to you. And we are also planning to release our strategic intelligence brief on Africa quite soon. And it will be sent out to you if you have been on this call, I believe, or it will be available on our REN21 channels. And please take your time to respond to this poll and to listen to some good music. I think it's Pata Pata or by Martha.
Also from my side, thanks a lot. Thank you, Frank, and the team for pulling this up.
Thank you, everybody. Please do answer the poll.
It's always lovely. I see it on gallery view and I can just see people's heads bobbing as they're filling in the response. It's such a great song to end on.
True.
So folks, we're going to keep the poll open for as long as needed, so no need to rush. The session is now over. And before I close everything down, just want to say thanks to everybody. The poll stays open. Once you've completed it, do feel free to log off and enjoy the rest of your day. I'm going to keep this call open for about 2 more minutes, just to make sure we don't lose anybody who's submitting any responses. But if you are finished and you're done, you can wave and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.